Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali are two of the most widely known and important African-American culture icons in history. Through their outspoken political activism, they are able to revolutionize racial politics, creating solidarity, pride, and a sense of identity for millions of black people in America. We will be rereading the nation through a theoretical lens, employing Gramsci's hegemony, Marx's class consciousness, and Syed's Orientalism. Supporting our argument, we will explore black internationalism and the Black Power movement, and the ways in which this contested the hegemonic understanding of racial identity in America. A comprehensive definition of hegemony was made by the Marxist theoretician and politician Antonio Gramsci, who states, "Hegemony is the unspoken cooperation between dominant social groups in both the state and society that promotes the reinforcement of established norms and practices under the guise of ideology in order to allow the elite to remain in power." Through looking at Black Power theory, we can see how black people were subordinated by white hegemony in numerous ways. For instance, it has been argued that the black man in America has been subjected to institutional racism. This is when a pattern of social institutions such as governmental organizations, schools, banks, and courts of law give negative treatment to a group of people based on their race. Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali acknowledged the presence of institutional racism in society, and as a result, they felt that integrating and working with such a system would never lead to true liberation of black people. As a result, they both focused on building a black American community who was in direct opposition to the white hegemonic power structure and everything it stood for. This oppositional rhetoric of black defiance to the white hegemonic regime is expressed by Malcolm X, who bluntly states his opposition on the white man. "We have a common oppressor, a common exploiter, a common discriminator. But once we all realize that we have a common enemy, then we unite on the basis of what we have in common. And what we have foremost in common is that enemy, the white man." Another tool that was exercised to maintain white hegemony that Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali tried to contest against was the process of indirect rule, where the white power structure rules the black community through local blacks who are responsive to the white leaders, the downtown white machine, not the black populace. This results in the leaders feeling they must play ball in order to exact maximum benefits, and therefore limiting the level of revolutionary change that Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and much of the black community were fighting for. Antonio Gramsci describes this political hegemonic technique as he states, "Undoubtedly, the fact of hegemony presupposes that account be taken of the interests and the tendencies of the groups over which hegemony is to be exercised, and that a certain compromise equilibrium should be formed. In other words, that the leading group should make sacrifices of an economic, corporate kind." It can be argued that the government tried to apply indirect rule to Muhammad Ali when they drafted him to fight in the Vietnam War. One of the main reasons he was against the draft was because he felt the government was attempting to co-opt his powerful image by conscripting him into the army for public relations, to engage support at home and abroad for the death trap that the war in Vietnam was becoming for thousands of recruits and Vietnamese. By standing up against the white authority, he not only maintained his political and religious integrity, but exposed the hypocrisy of fighting a war to keep the world safe for democracy, when black people were not receiving the benefits of democracy at home. A third form of white colonialism imposed on black people is the process of assimilation. This involves a black person being pressured to adapt to the mainstream, which means to disassociate oneself from the black race, its cultures, community, and heritage, and become immersed, dispersed in other terms, in the white world. This concept of racial and social assimilation undermines the self-esteem of the black community, as it infers that to be black is the same as being somehow bad or unwanted. Black power rhetoric forcefully disputes this notion as expressed in the final lines of Black Power, the Politics of Liberation in America, as it states, "The time is long overdue for the black community to redefine itself, set forth new values and goals, and organize around them." Malcolm X uses the political framework of the Black Power movement to regain a sense of national pride for black people, as can be seen in one of his speeches where he famously uses the analogy of coffee to express his argument. "It's just like when you've got some coffee that's too black, which means it's too strong. What do? You integrate it with cream. You make it weak. But if you pour too much cream in it, you won't even know you ever had coffee. It used to be hot, now it becomes cool. It used to be strong, it becomes weak. It used to wake you up, now it puts you to sleep."
Another power structure that preserved the hegemony was described by Palestinian theorist Edward Said. His book Orientalism provides an important contextual theory behind the Black Power movement because it attempts to expose social power relations between the dominant group and minorities. He defined Orientalism as a style of thought based upon an ontological and epistemological distinction made between the Orient and, most of the time, the Occident. Said's work demonstrates how these relations of the past repeat themselves and how knowledge is manipulated in order to further enforce homogeneous cultural perceptions of the other, leading to a process of cultural hegemony. According to Said, due to the distinction between the civilized West and uncivilized East, this paved the way for a white identity that is superior to non-white cultures, serving as a pretext for the inequality in American culture that Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali fought hard to remove. Said's work also helps us to further understand Black internationalism and how this relates to the bigger picture of the Black Power movement. The African American Intellectual History Society defines Black internationalism as a political culture that emerged in response to slavery, colonialism, and white imperialism, and that it centers on visions of freedom and liberation movements among African-descended people worldwide. Black internationalism shows how the rebellion against US hegemony manifested in the struggles in places such as Vietnam, Algeria, Cuba, and China. Muhammad Ali refusing when drafted into the Vietnam War is a perfect example of the Black Power movement spreading out of the confines of US borders.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some darker people or some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How am I going to shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? That would just take me to jail.
This video exemplifies the ways in which resistance to the hegemonic society was not just unique to America. Ali was imprisoned and stripped of his championship title due to his resistance. However, his shared experiences of racial inequality with the Vietnamese proves resistance against oppressors was not happening solely in America. They all had a common goal, which is why Muhammad Ali was quoted as saying, "No, I am not going 10,000 miles from home to help murder and burn another poor nation, simply to continue the domination of white slave masters of the darker people the world over."
You my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Viet Congs or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
Malcolm X also believed that the Black Revolution in the United States was not a minority rebellion, but a part of the worldwide struggle of the oppressed against the oppressor. Whilst people often associate Malcolm X and the civil rights movement with just America, his enduring legacy was in fact his contribution to the larger worldwide movement. Malcolm X was involved with the United Nations, and whilst he was not deceived by their real power, he viewed it as a forum in which he could talk about important issues surrounding world power and justice. Malcolm used the United Nations as an opportunity to exert pressure for breaking down the hegemonic powers of the world. By doing this, he called out to all oppressed races and victims of hegemony and called on them all to open their eyes and be aware of the oppression. Whilst the European and North American colonizers stood united, he called for all 22 million black people in the US and urged them to unite with their brothers and sisters in Africa and Asia. Marxist theory, developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, focuses on a general theory of social conflict in human behaviour. Marxists believe that social institutions function to maintain the organisation of society. It is proposed that these institutions maintain the division between the powerful and the powerless, mostly through the bourgeoisie's means of production and power to alienate those less powerful. Malcolm X is remembered as a revolutionary devoted to the liberation of blacks in America. Although not a Marxist, we can see that he indeed utilised some of the basic concepts that stem from Marxist ideology. For example, Malcolm X was a huge supporter of a revolution in order for change. Malcolm X articulates in his message to the grassroots, a speech made in 1963, that if you're afraid of black nationalism, you're afraid of revolution, and if you love revolution, you love black nationalism, also stressing the global extent to this plight, the white man knows what a revolution is. He knows that the black revolution is worldwide in scope and in nature. In relation to what Malcolm X professed, H. Rap Brown, chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, believed that black people were made to hate themselves. I saw a brother on the corner once trying to figure out what was wrong with his skin. It didn't match his flesh-coloured band-aid, which draws upon the concept of America as a predominantly white hegemonic society, therefore commenting on what Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali were keen to redefine. In many interviews, Malcolm X reminds viewers of the discrimination that black people have suffered for many years.
The black people in this country have been the victims of violence at the hands of the white man for 400 years.
Malcolm X repeatedly stated that democracy was hypocrisy and called for black people to unite against the white man, the one in power, thereby drawing upon similar ideas of Marxist theory. Although Malcolm X's ideas were revolutionary for their time, Martin Luther King seemed to be the poster boy for the civil rights movement, as opposed to Malcolm X. Linking back to hegemony, a theory formed by Gramsci who identified as Marxist, we can see how Malcolm X's membership in the Nation of Islam differentiated him from Martin Luther King, who was a Southern Christian. In an interview after Malcolm X's visit to Mecca, he tells how America needs to understand Islam because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. However, there were many misconceptions to do with Malcolm X and his opinion on violence. A lot of people seem to misconceive the Nation of Islam and therefore Malcolm X as a supporter of violence. However, this was not the case, as Malcolm X was simply a supporter of self-defense, a very important distinction to make when analysing him as an icon. Malcolm X seemed to be a secondary leader of the civil rights movement, and this is still relevant today. For example, in 2011, a Martin Luther King Jr. memorial statue was erected in Washington, D.C., whereas no such memorial site has been created for Malcolm X. Like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali comments on how black people have been in jail for 400 years. We've been here in America. During his involvement in the Black Power movement, Muhammad Ali became the most visible symbol of black pride and protest during the era. When linking Ali to Marxist theory, his commentary on the ways in which the oppressed have been brainwashed correlates to what Marx identified as false consciousness. Marx concerned false consciousness as a byproduct or consequence of the socially distorted organisation of modern society. This relates to what Muhammad Ali often commented on. For instance, when you recognise who your enemy is, he can no longer brainwash you. He spoke for the oppressed black people of America and demanded they recognise that their society was suppressing them. Through analysing our icons Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, we have investigated the numerous ways in which they contested a white hegemonic cultural order and racial identity. By incorporating black power theory, we have explored how black people in America have been subjected to white colonialism and institutional racism, forming the basis of Malcolm X's and Muhammad Ali's political rhetoric of defiance. Through Marx, we have seen how class structures form the basis for racial hierarchies, especially in America. We've also analysed the way in which Marx's ideology, which proposes the need to overthrow the bourgeoisie in order for a harmonious society, linked to Malcolm X's belief in a revolution in order for change. By analysing Said, we can further understand othering and how this informs the oppressive attitudes towards racial minorities. As a result, we can also examine the global impacts of othering through black internationalism, researching how the Black Power movement was not just limited to America.
I am looking for freedom.